Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Alex.
What's up?
And we have two guests with us today, Larry, Hovorka. Am I saying that right? That's right.
Yeah, Hovorka.
Hovorka.
Oh, yep.
Okay, great. And our lead pastor, Mark Ashton.
Hey there.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, glad to be here.
Once again, your second appearance on the Uncomfortable podcast. It's a pretty big deal for you, I'm sure.
I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling strong. I'm feeling loved. So.
All right, awesome. Today, it's the spookiest of podcasts. We are going to be, if Larry's shirt hasn't given it away, if you're watching this right now, if you're not listening, but you're watching, he's got this jack-o'-lantern thing going on. We're going to be talking about Halloween and kind of its cultural relevance, and also maybe as Christians, what our perspective should be on the holiday. But before we get to the nitty-gritty of it all, I kind of want to go around the table, and in this kind of Halloween-inspired question has risen, and that is, what's probably the most ridiculous costume / Halloween situation you found yourself in? Maybe it was regrettable, maybe it was fun, but is something you're willing to share with everyone here around the table. Do you want to go first, Larry?
Sure,
I feel like
absolutely.
You're excited about this one.
Yes. I was very young. I think I was around 3 years old, and my parents decided I wasn't quite old enough to go trick-or-treating. And so we were sitting at home, and the doorbell kept ringing, and these kids kept coming to the door in costume. And my mom would go up and give them candy, and I'm like, what's this all about? And why don't I get any of this candy? She's like, well, we just thought you're a little too young for this. And I just kind of begged and pleaded. It's like, well, can we go? And she's like, well, we really don't have a costume for you. And my dad was like, well, you can probably come up with something. He was kind of siding with me. And so my mom went and got into, she had a thing with a bunch of fabric in it, and got out some fabric and kind of made this dress, as it were, out of like it was like a brown and white checkerboard pattern. Dug out an old scarf, wrapped that around my head, did some makeup on me, lipstick,
oh boy,
and combed my hair down. And so I was a little girl.
Wow.
And she's like, you good with this? And I'm like, if it gets me free candy, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So I went trick-or-treating with my mom just up and down our block, dressed as a girl.
Impressive.
So, and you remember it to this day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's photo evidence. I didn't bring it, thankfully. It's amazing that I became such a fan of Halloween after that experience, but, definitely had an effect on me.
That is an impressive, a very impressive story there.
Thank you.
I hope it didn't scar you too much.
No.
Okay, so who wants to go next?
Mine, it's not like embarrassing, but the most memorable thing I have is my dad. One year, I don't remember how old I was, probably 5. I remember he just took foil, put it around a box. I was a robot. But the best thing about it was he took Christmas lights and inside not super glued, hot glued all the lights there, and then had a battery pack inside, and I lit up. I was like,
that's so cool.
It was way before its time. You can't just, now you can get LED lights and everything lights up, but then he literally took last year's Christmas lights and wired them up, because he worked with electricity and did kind of that electrician type of work in his field, and so he was super handy with that. And I was the coolest kid way before his time with light up everything. I wasn't plugged into anything. I thought that was super awesome. So I don't remember why I was a robot. Probably just because my dad wanted to show off how awesome he was, maybe, to be able to wire something like that up. But it was awesome.
That sounds
Very
awesome.
Cool.
Mark, do you have anything?
Well, my one that I remember making the most was probably about 3rd grade. I made a Cheerios box. And I was
that you could fit in.
I made a box big enough to fit in, and I remember that the paint that I used, it was kind of that old, mix it up powdery paint that you have, was not really good enough to cover the box, and so it was kind of an ugly brown Cheerios box that I was walking around in. And I also remember in about probably 5th grade, I was Spider-Man, and I don't know if you remember, so we're talking 1978 level costumes.
I do not
These
remember.
are not
Box costumes with the plastic mask and.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And that Spider-Man was a thing by then. And, I had a Spider-Man costume that I had, and it was the very tight nylon thing. And I remember ripping out my Spider-Man suit, right in the tuchus in 5th grade. One of the most embarrassing moments ever.
Oh, no,
and
right there by your Clark. That's a callback to our
Clark, that's
Let's
exactly
call back to the old episode when
my
you're
Clark was hanging out. It was ugly.
Oh, man. So mine's not that far from Larry's, although I should have been old enough to know better. I was 18 years old. I had just gotten a job at Sam's Club as a cashier, and I was new. And it was like, I felt like it was maybe my first week. And they're like, all right, Halloween's coming up. Everybody, we're encouraging you all to dress up and come to work that way. And I didn't know anybody there. I was just, okay, I guess I should dress up because I don't want to feel left out. Like I'm not participating. And I didn't have a costume. I didn't have money because I just started the job. And I'm like, so I found like a dress that my sister had. I found a wig that my mom had for some reason that was just like short brown and curly hair. I had some Austin Powers teeth from another, like, I don't know, probably Spencer's Gifts or something like that. And then I had this stocking cap that had wings on it that said "Love God." And so I put all of this together. I mean, I didn't have a beard or anything at the time. So, and I showed up at work. The thing I didn't think about was the fact that my own coworkers didn't all know me yet because you're at a place where the schedules are evolving. Yeah. So there's a couple things that went along with it. One, my manager, she was like, "Oh, this is so funny. Let's go get your Sam's Club card taken a picture with this.
Nice.
And we'll call you Erica on the card and everything." So I had a Sam's Club card that has this on it. But I remember checking a lady who was like, "Yeah, we just buy our kids bulk candy and we don't do trick-or-treating." And I was like even doing a voice. I was like, "Oh, okay," like trying to like personify this old lady. Yeah, pretty much. And even the lady tells her daughter, "Hand the nice lady your candy." And I'm just like, "Oh, this is working worse than I thought." And then at one point I took a break and I'm sitting in the break room. I'm probably 2 tables across the room from another employee who sits down to have his lunch, and I sit down and take my wig off and pull my teeth out and start eating a sandwich. And the guy's face, he just looked mortified. He was just like, "Who is this? Like what?" So I didn't really put together all the consequences that could have come along with that costume. But anyways, Larry, you're here. People are probably wondering, like, why is this guy here? Who is this guy? Maybe they might be, they might not be familiar with you, but you have a pretty lengthy legacy with Christ Community Church, right? Mm-hmm. You're probably one of the long timers on staff, right?
Second to Steve Yost, I believe.
That's right. That's right.
A little over 26 years.
And I think the 3rd longest staff member ever at Christ Community Church after R.R. Brown and Steve Yost.
Sure.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That you're up there.
It's a big legacy.
So I think we invited you primarily because you do, can I say love Halloween? Or
I have an affinity for it.
Affinity, yeah. Can I say that? Yeah. Okay, all right. That's so. Maybe explain that just a little bit. Like, give us a little insight to why you're so passionate about it.
Sure. Well, if it wasn't the first time I dressed up as a girl that got it, it was it was a lot to do with childhood. Getting dressed up and going to school and having the costume parades at school, I just thought was so much fun. And all the theatrical aspects of it, getting to dress up as something and be someone, superhero or whatever that you're not, I just thought was very intriguing. Those grade school years really just shaped my affinity for it. Like art, when I was in grade school, it was a lot different than it is now, I assume. But like specifically in 4th grade, like our teachers went all out. They had a box maze that we crawled through. We all went to a dark room, and the teacher told a story about the witch, and you got grapes, and those were her eyes, and the spaghetti, and those are her brains.
Totally
and
remember.
I was like, this is amazing, and all the treats that went along with it, and the fact that you got dressed up and you went and you got free candy, like that was just I just couldn't believe it. So just growing up, I just think that had the biggest effect on me. And then as I got older, I got a job at a local costume place that I worked in, specifically got a job there because they did Halloween, makeup and masks and costumes and all that. Had a blast working there with all that. Like got really into like stage makeup and, the theatrical aspect of, doing my face up and dressing up. And then I started getting into like, all right, well, where else in the world is Halloween a big thing? And I started reading stories. This was like pre-internet about Knott's Berry Farm out in California and how they had this all immersive like Halloween event at their theme park. And I was like, one of these days I'm going to go out there and check this out. And it was like 2003, I think was my first time out there. And went out with a friend of mine, and walking into that event with fog everywhere and monsters coming out and haunted houses, I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to come here every year. And just so happened, luckily, that my wife, who I met a few years later, we went there on our honeymoon.
Wow.
As one of the places we went on our honeymoon. And she liked it, so I'm like, well, that's a good sign.
That is.
So we've gone out there, not every year since, but almost every year.
Yeah.
And we just kind of make it part of our, we got married in October. We go, take that annual trip out there in October and experience that. And so.
All right. Well, so we're going to consider you our resident Halloween aficionado, just because of that. But real quick, just to help people get to know you, what do you do here at the church? Real quick.
I'm the facilities manager here.
Okay.
So I oversee a bunch of part-timers and full-timers who take care of cleaning and setting up the building. I help out with all of the events as far as like, making sure that they're set up and ready to go, cleaning up after them, getting ready for just the daily routine and the weekly routine of everything that goes on here.
Okay.
If you've been baptized here, if you've used a potty here,
I have not been baptized here.
No, not you. I'm saying if someone
gotcha.
has,
Yes.
then they have benefited. If they've gone to an event,
right.
anything, they've
Ever used a
benefited
room.
from Larry Hovorka's ministry
Yeah,
over
that's right.
That's
almost
awesome.
3 decades.
All right, real quick, let's get through your 3 questions.
Yep.
Just rapid fire here. Have you ever had a nickname? If so, what is it?
Lawrence Olivier was what my 6th grade teacher gave me.
Okay.
I had no idea who Lawrence Olivier was, but he called me it and I thought it was kind of cool.
All right.
So that was one
All
of
right.
them.
Good to know,
I'm
Lawrence.
going to Google that later.
Yeah.
Everybody's got homework now. All right. If you had a warning label, what would it say?
Well, that's a good one. Probably something from a like a Halloween costume. Yeah, I'm drawing a complete blank. Like what
Warning,
that says.
choking hazard.
Yeah, choking hazard. There you go.
All right. And then what was the last book you read?
Oh, the last book I read. Where's Waldo? Does
Okay,
that
that counts. That
Yeah.
counts. There it is. Was he wearing a Halloween costume in that?
No, he was
okay,
not.
Okay. All right. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the origins of Halloween. I think sometimes that helps people, maybe put some grounding to it. I think, there's different backgrounds, whether it's something from the occult or even just pagan holidays where, they would, I think it was like a Celtic thing where they would try to, they'd get together and have a festival or a thing where they'd light lights and try to keep the spirits from the afterlife away from them, or they would think that around this fall season, I don't know how you'd explain it, but almost like the afterlife, that realm was the veil was the thinnest it was all year, and that those ghosts or the spirits would come and they could light lights to keep them away from them. And then I think even beyond that, like when the Vatican got involved, they were trying to combat that with like a Christian holiday that they called Hollow Mass. That was on November 1st, and then that was kind of, where it was All Saints Day, right? So they celebrated the saints, and then but All Hallows Eve was the eve of Hollow Mass. So there's Halloween. That's where that came around on the 31st of October. So that's kind of its origin. It's funny that you think about the Catholic Church got involved, and then I hear this is kind of spawned off of that in some ways. What's everybody else's take on that? What do you? Is it is it all like is it all evil? Is it just kind of not good? What is it? Like what's the bad side, good side of like this holiday?
I think there's several holidays, and especially American culture, we're in 2019, and that I was researching are called patchwork holidays. And so Halloween is like the most patchworked holiday that there is, because it has so many influences from so many different people. Like it's one of those we don't really know the origins fully. You know, some people are super serious and they're like, Halloween started the day Satan got kicked out of, heaven, and everything's been evil with him since, and any participation in it is hanging out with Satan, so there's people that probably take it all the way back there to when evil was invented. But it's one of those patchwork holidays that brings in paganism, it brings in religion trying to re-steer it and redeem it. That has to do with like the dead and saints and celebrating it. It brings in American culture of costumes and all that. It brings in farming culture of, hey, this is when we're harvesting and there's a harvest moon and full moon, and this is just why pumpkins are involved, and just because of the time of year. So it's like one of those patchwork things that everybody's just kind of added to over centuries of cultures and religions and paganism and all that kind of stuff, that probably more than any other holiday we really have no clue. We just all kind of throw our own cultural spin on it, and some people hate it and some people love it, it seems like.
Well, even like bobbing for apples and some of that stuff, like it came over as immigrants came to America and they brought their traditions for Halloween, and then like even trick-or-treating kind of started to spar from that in the early 1930s. They were, I mean, it was almost scary. It was like bribery, like we're going to spook you, literally scare you or torment you unless you gave us something in return. And then later in the 30s they kind of spun it into this, hey everybody, let's just get along, ring the doorbell, we'll give you candy. Like let's not, they were stealing fences or gates off fences for some reason. I guess that was a thing, I don't know. So it's, and I think even Christmas, like the origins of that, like why we celebrate on the day that we do is similar, where it was like there was like a Roman festival around that time, and then even like a Northern European, they called it the Yule festival, where there was all sorts of debauchery happening, but then the church came in and said, well, let's celebrate Jesus, and then it just sort of got twisted in there in some sort of way. And then but then when the immigrants came over, they started to bring, because I think even the Puritans, when they first came to like America, were like, no, don't do Christmas. Christmas is bad, because it got connected to all these pagan rituals and all this terrible like bad Mardi Gras type things, I guess. And then the immigrants started coming over and bringing these more traditional values that we now look at as Christmas. So it's kind of interesting how, like you said, Alex, these patchwork holidays, they get formed over years, and we all know a little bit about them, but we don't know necessarily why 100% they are what they are, when it comes to Halloween specifically.
So Christmas isn't actually Jesus' birthday, Eric?
I hate to break it to you, but I don't think.
And Halloween's not actually Satan's birthday?
I mean, it would be a much simpler world, Alex, if it was. I mean,
there goes my whole life.
It would be. I think probably if we're going to go there, it's helpful to add in that, likely Jesus' birth was sometime in the spring, and people adapted it to December because the winter solstice was at December 21st. Most pagan cultures have a reemergence of the sun kind of a ritual. So 4 days after the winter solstice, the sun is coming back up. Christians, particularly who were being persecuted, wanted to be able to celebrate Jesus' birthday, but they had no day for it. So sometime in the spring just didn't quite cook up for them, but they could celebrate it kind of underground under the cover of these winter solstice holidays. And so they picked that day because of that, because they wouldn't be killed for it, which was, not too bad.
That's good.
And since we don't know what the real day is, December 25th has just become that traditional day.
All right. More on Christmas later.
Yeah, that'll be in the next holiday episode, the Christmas special. Yeah. So let's. Okay. So we kind of. I mean, is there anybody have anything else to add to the Halloween and kind of its heritage, or its? Is it strictly like
good patchwork?
Is it something? Where do you think some of I guess it's a satanic holiday thing. Where did that come from? Is it mainly because it was a pagan holiday, or is it because just the things that are celebrated on that time, the scary stuff? Like, is that just kind of what's informed people's beliefs around it, or anybody have any insight to that?
Yeah, that's I mean, I would just guess, because it's always really a lot of like either the Christian, when the Catholics took over it, and the pagan it always kind of flirted with issues around death and
and the
afterlife and
right.
things like that, which has always been
macabre type
mysterious
thing.
and scary, and what is happening in that death and afterlife. I think obviously costumes that have to do with that, like violence and there's blood, gore, fear, scary movies, like all those kind of things have added towards that, I think, cultural thing where Christians want to distance themselves from it because, and for good reason. I think they're like, hey, we think that looks evil. It's all bad. We want to stay away from bad things. And so I think it's easy to like see some of those things and be like, it's all bad. No, we're not going to do it. So I would guess that's probably part of it. Like for my parents growing up, I'm guessing why there wasn't like a good definition, but it was like, hey, that was evil. And I looked into the world, I saw, people with scary costumes and stuff like that. And so it made sense in my little head that, this is a bad thing because I see skeletons walking around. That's scary. I see people running around with knives and Jason masks and Halloween movies and all that kind of stuff. So it just made sense to me growing up.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note as well that there are people out there who are obsessed with evil, death, violence, etc. There really are Satan worshipers that are out there.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for a place where they can rally around a particular idea, issue, holiday, etc. And Halloween has been the one that's kind of attracted a lot of those people to say, hey, if we're going to celebrate violence or death or Satan, that's a day that we're going to adopt for our own to be that. So there really are some people who have taken it to, the very negative extremes.
Yeah.
I think Wiccans too observe Halloween as like one of those times in particular that they, practice and recognize those kinds of things.
So what's
and I'll add in as well, because I think there is a spiritual element. There really is an evil one who's out there.
Yeah,
he really is trying to wreck our lives. He really is trying to destroy things. And if he can come in on any of those moments in order to be able to accelerate pain and evil in this world, he's going to take advantage of that. And I think it's one of those things we need to be aware of.
Yeah, if we open the door to it, obviously he's going to walk right in.
Absolutely.
So what's let's kind of delve into everybody's personal philosophies. Like what do you celebrate? How do you, like, if you have kids, what do you participate there with, or what do your families do? Is it something that you're even involved in, or do you shut your lights off and hide? I mean, everybody kind of has their own take on it. I'm kind of curious. Anybody want to volunteer to start this one? Larry, I'm kind of looking at you because I feel like as our Halloween aficionado, you can kind of tell us.
Yeah. I mean, obviously when I was younger, like my parents let me go trick-or-treating, and I always got together with my friends and, walked around the neighborhood and trick-or-treated, dressed up in school. When I got a little bit older, I was, working in a store that promoted and sold, Halloween and masquerade type stuff. So I was, pretty involved with that. I would get involved in costume contests. Never won any of them, but I still had fun dressing up. I took theatrical makeup in college and really tried to expound on that a little bit in my costumes. As far as celebrating as I got older, my wife and I, once we got married, we thought by having a Halloween party or a masquerade party was a good way to invite all of our friends and invite people that we would invite some people that we normally wouldn't, and invite them over, and it was a fun and safe environment, and everyone really was into like what other people were wearing, and it was just a fun way to gather people together, in just a fun environment, So we haven't done as many parties since we moved to our new house. Just October is a time where we travel a lot. But we have, and I used to do a haunted house in our garage at our old house to have people go through and have like my nieces and nephews go through, just for fun. So like those are the ways that we celebrated. We definitely have our light on and invite the kids in our neighborhood to come and, trick or treat. We decorate the front of our house up to a degree, nothing very real extreme, but
you only give them chick tracks, right?
Yes. Chick tracks. Wow. That takes me back. I used to have a collection of those, actually.
Great. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, for us, one of the things I recognize is that Halloween is the time when all my neighbors are out. So I've always had kind of an obsession with how do you reach your neighbors? How do you love your neighbors? How do you engage with people who are in your community? And in our current culture where people tend to stay behind closed doors, inside their air conditioning, etc., Halloween's that weird exception where everybody is outside. And I thought, man, if I'm going to build a relationship with my neighbors, I've got to maximize that opportunity. Plus, like every kid, my kids wanted to get the sugar high and rush out and all that kind of stuff. So we've made Halloween one of those times that we just say it's going to be neighbor night.
Yeah.
And when our kids were littler, of course, we would be out on the streets with our kids, going house to house. We would always pair up with other neighbors' families in our neighborhood so that we get, an hour and a half of conversation with people as the kids walk along. Great bridge building time. When we give away candy, we always want to make sure we give away good candy.
Yeah.
Because I remember as a kid, I would remember like which house was which by what candy they gave us on Halloween. And the people who gave away the big bars, man, they were the cool people.
Yeah.
And I always want to say, man, if I have one chance to make an impression on our neighbors, I want to give away good candy to them. We have had some events at church that we've given away some invitations to those events as well on the evening of Halloween. And sometimes we would even, when our kids were littler, we would have our neighbors come over to our house for a post trick or treat like debrief, and the kids would usually swap candies. So our one kid who hated chocolate would trade for Starburst with the other kids, and then everyone would wind up getting the candies they want, and our neighbors would come over and just hang out and talk for another hour after the trick or treating was done. So we've always tried to maximize that Halloween night for neighborhood relationships.
Yeah, for me, I'm a dad of pretty young kids, and so not even all of them can walk, and so I'm really trying to formulate what that looks like for our families, because I grew up I never once went trick-or-treating officially as a kid, because what I did was our church hosted this thing called No Trick, We Treat. So it was a way to Jesus juke it, and so we all wore costumes. We showed up at the church, we got bags of candy, and then a track and like an invitation to church. And so we would do all the things that were Halloween, but say we weren't, kind of. And then we would take bags and then ring it and say, "No trick, we treat," and then give them candy. But then there was a silent expectation that they would give us candy still too, and so then it's like we officially didn't, and we could consciously say we didn't, but we actually did.
Yeah.
And so, and then we would go back to the church and there'd be a costume contest, and only certain things like costumes you could and couldn't wear and all those kind of things. And so I remember doing that like literally my entire life growing up. My wife didn't, her family, she went trick-or-treating, she dressed up, she did all of that. And so now, as you marry and you bring in two different cultures into the family, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to do with our families, we're still in the middle of that. But I mean, my oldest is 6 and my second is 4. So those are the two that really understand candy and people giving him to them. Like previously, it's like, well, do we take our baby up there that we know can't eat candy just so mom and dad can have a stash? And what I always want to do now that Jimmy Fallon, I want to get on his show sometime, where you tell your kids you ate all the candy, but I don't think my kids are quite old enough still yet to like understand like how mean that is. Like, what? So that's my Halloween goal is to one day get on there with my family. But yeah, we're trying to navigate doing it in our neighborhood. We've typically gone to my aunt's house because they have a big gathering, but we're trying to wrestle through, okay, this is when our neighbors do come over, and this is when we want to get to know our neighbors. And so one neighbor's been, who are a Christian family, they bring these boo baskets. I've never heard of this before. It's kind of like Mayday, but boo baskets, and they drop them off on your doorstep, and it's got candy and toys and stuff like that in it, and it says, hey, pass this little paper along and give it to the next family. So it's kind of been like this cool thing another family initiated and around Halloween that we've been kind of enjoying. Like our kids get all these toys, and then we take them to the store, pick out candy and little trinkets in the dollar spot at Target, and then give it to the next people. And it's kind of mysterious, except it's 2019 and everybody has a Ring door camera, so who did it.
You have to go in costume.
Yeah. So but you don't have to take it to the people that gave it to you. So that's the nice thing.
Yeah, I think it's similar for like my family. My daughter's 10 and my son's 8, but we've always kind of just gone where family was and did a little bit of trick or treating, and they kind of have a grasp on it. This year, they're just like, let's will you just buy us candy and then we don't have to go trick or treating? I'm like, well, okay. That seems like an interesting take on it. But I remember specifically one year my daughter was probably 5, I want to say, and she says, I want to be a witch for Halloween.
Which witch?
Not a sandwich, but the traditional Halloween witch. When I talked to her about it, I mean, at 5, her grasp of what that was just, it was Halloween fun. You dressed up as this thing, and you got candy, and I mean, she had such just a very surface view of it as a kid, so I talked to her about it, and I talked to her about how, like, not as much as you could to a 5-year-old, like what maybe some of like why witchcraft is bad and what, but I understood why she wanted to dress up like it. So I said, you know what, that's totally fine. Let's go get you a cute witch costume and you can go trick-or-treating. And she was an adorable witch. I will give her that. But I posted a picture of her on Facebook, and you would not believe the feedback I got. And people who were very much like, I mean, do you understand what you're doing? What are you exposing your daughter to? It was a very almost, it was earth-shaking to me, because I'm like, well, I know my foundation and I know how I'm raising my kid, and I also hope that you, as a friend of mine, know where I stand. And so it was one of those interesting kind of paradoxes where I'm just like, I don't know exactly how to respond to this, and I don't know that I would change it. If I could go back and redo it, I don't think I would, because it was very much like, has she ever wanted to be a witch again? No. That was, but it was just this thing of her being a kid, and it was that kind of magical just thing about it. It was very surface level. It wasn't about any type of thing evil. But I think sometimes as adults, we really lose focus of what it's like to be a kid. And it's so easy for us to just latch onto what our experiences are sometimes, whatever that is in life. Like if it's, we want to take all that baggage and throw it at a little kid sometimes and go, oh, how dare you, you can't do this. And but anyways, I think there is something to, I think Larry, you've even expressed that, just kind of the magic of the candy and the excitement and all of that. And as a kid, that's kind of what it's about. But I think we do have to kind of leverage it in a way that it can be a learning experience for our kids, and we can expose them, or at least explain to them the dangers of it, but also, how can we let them have fun with it. And I think, and in the history of the church, we've tried to do that too, with trunk or treats, fall festivals. We've tried to, as Alex so eloquently put it, Jesus juke it. And do you think our culture is open to that still? Like, is that something where they're still accepting it, or do they feel like we are doing the trick or treat, where we're like kind of trying to hoodwink them a little bit and be like, oh, we're celebrating, but here's Jesus on the side,
Before we jump into that, I think one of the helpful, or at least a helpful comment related to how people respond to each other in Halloween, I think, is to have a paradigm. We have a lot of people, let's just say here at Christ Community, that come from a huge variety of backgrounds when it comes to what their experiences have been. Yeah. So we have people who, their view of Halloween is going to be very secularized, from an innocent background. We got other people who have been, satanically, ritually abused. Right. And so their sensitivity level around things like, witches or spells or things like that is like, man, don't even mess with that, because I've walked down that road and I've experienced deep and intense pain around that. And I think we need to have a real sensitivity to people who have got those kinds of backgrounds, as well as people who have got the, the more secular feelings towards the holiday.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's important. And maybe have those conversations sometimes too. Like, I know in my personal experience, it was something where those turned into phone conversations. It wasn't a thing where we just had a debate on Facebook. It was, let me talk to you, because like it's not, I think you're misunderstanding where I'm coming from, and I'm misunderstanding where you're coming from. Let's bridge that gap. And it was a good opportunity to have those conversations.
Totally.
I'd love to hear from Larry, because you've been here for almost 30 years. What's CCC's historically done in the past? Like, I think it's been a great tool that, that churches have used in the past and are still using today, with trunk or treats, kind of a new invention of that. So what's been the history of CCC? What have been the peaks, the valleys of just how we've done Halloween stuff?
Right. I think it was back in the mid 90s or maybe late 90s when we decided to do, I think they were kind of gaining popularity around the country, like a church-driven event. We called ours Hallelujah Hoedown. And it started out with, we had some games in the kids' classrooms, and kids were encouraged to dress up in, not scary costumes and come, and they would play games in the classrooms, and no matter if they won or lost, they got a treat out of it. We had snacks served out of the kitchen, nachos and those kind of things, and and it was a pretty big hit. And I don't think we actually did it on Halloween. I think we did it sometime around like a Friday or Saturday or something like that, whatever was closest. And I think, if I remember correctly, at the time, we were the only church in town that was doing something like that. And so it blew up real quick. And we went from having it just on one floor of the kids' wing to both floors, and including a bunch of inflatables in the gym and a bunch of games in the atrium. And it was like a full, an all church type of event. Like, kids ministry was super involved in it, the setup and implementation of it. And then so we were getting a ton of kids, and we're like, man, this is great. And then some other churches started doing something similar. The trunk or treat craze started coming out. Other malls started doing like the trick or treat, all this safe stuff, for kids to go inside and do. And we kind of peaked with it, and it crested, and the numbers started to die down because there were just so many other options. And so after doing it for I think we almost did it for 10 years. We're like, hey, let's just pack this up and take a break from doing it, for a while, because the numbers weren't justifying the effort that went into putting the event off. So
cool. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And plus, where CCC is, there's different opportunities. So I worked at a church here locally that was like literally smack dab in a neighborhood. So trunk or treat, we put a lot into trunk or treat, and people from the church would show up and decorate their trunks, and it was wild. It was fun. There was like a contest that my team won 2 of the 3 years. Just a humble brag. And but it was fun, but it was a great way to engage the neighborhood on a different day than Halloween, because it also, kids, you spend money on these costumes, or moms sew their costumes, mostly not last minute, and you want to do it more than once, so totally. Like for a church, it was a great outreach, because we're in a neighborhood and they could walk through a parking lot and literally like get 40 different, it was like a Halloween stash. And so kids are getting more and more candy on Halloween, which is awesome, because literally there's probably like a thing every day of the week. You could hit up churches in Omaha and probably get rich on candy and sell it on eBay later. But so that was like a perfect opportunity for that church. But for us, we're in the middle of a huge business park, and so might be awkward, to say, hey, TD Ameritrade people, we want to give you candy, and so
we could try it. Maybe we should try it.
I don't think we're like throwing shade at churches that do things like that by any means, but for us, like in our position and where we're even at locally, it's like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We can put our eggs in a lot of other great baskets that we can provide for our city. So,
All right. Well, then I think that kind of leads us to what is a healthy perspective? Like we call ourselves Christ followers. What's a way that we can, especially with your kids in this culture, they see their friends doing it. They want to be a part of that. I think, Larry, your example was dead on. Like that's something that I think parents are going to experience. Or also, I love your example of throwing parties, and that's a safe place to maybe invite non-believers into something where you can build relationship with them. Is all of that, is that kind of where we're pointing to with this? Is like what is a Christian's perspective on this holiday?
One of the things I think about regularly related to this is, how did Jesus engage this world? Because we live in a messed up, sin-scarred, pain-filled world. And Jesus said, I'm not going to avoid that, but I'm going to parachute right into the middle of it, set up my home there, hang out with people, and make a life with them. And as we approach cultural holidays, I think that's one of the things we should have as our perspective as well, is to say, okay, how can I parachute into the middle of that with a redemptive mindset? And ask the question, how can I take something that perhaps was meant for evil and then bring it around and say, let's utilize this for the good of the kingdom. Let's redeem this and bring love into the midst of a time that might be celebrating evil. How can we be lights in the darkness? And I'm not sure the tools or techniques are nearly as important as the heart and the attitude that's behind it, of trying to engage in a world that, to see opportunities rather than to see barriers, and to love people along the way.
That's good. That's good. Because I think the same is true for Christmas. It's a Christian holiday, right? But so many people aren't even celebrating the heart behind why we celebrate Christmas, like that our Savior was born, but we love that this is still like a national kind of holiday and people pause their lives and gather around it. And so we're even trying to redeem our own holidays in some ways, which is fun and interesting. And we get, more church attendance, and we have to leverage all those kind of things. And so I think the same with Halloween is how do we engage people in different kind of ways? I think Paul talks about in Corinthians, even if Halloween was solely evil and solely all that, he talks in 1 Corinthians 8 and 9 about meat that was sacrificed to idols, and he has this whole conversation and debate with people like, can we eat this? Can we not eat this? And he's like, don't participate in like the sacrificing of idols, but once this goes to the market, like you can purchase it. It's okay. You can eat it. Like you can redeem what, like God made the meat, so someone doesn't have the right to really curse it. And so you can still go and partake in that and not feel guilty about it. But then he gets into the conscience about, we do have a conscience, and if we have something that we really feel like maybe it's convicting us for whatever reason, maybe it's been a dark part of our past, right, or a dark part of someone else's past, and the abuse has happened, or fear. Like for me, I literally as a kid hated haunted houses and had a lot of fear because our house was broken into when I was a little kid, and I just remember seeing some of that imagery. And so like fear had a big stronghold on me as a little kid. Like my sister had to walk with me out to take out the trash when it was dark out. And so that was like a part of my life. And so I think my parents were trying to keep me from some of those fear elements that are really driven into Halloween, because I was a jumpy kid and all that kind of stuff. And so watching scary movies and all those things, they were anti that, I think mainly because they were trying to protect my heart, and they had a conscience for me and all that kind of stuff. And so I think those are things we keep from a biblical perspective in mind of, okay, it's not all evil. We can redeem it, but also we have a responsibility as the body of Christ to be true to our conscience and not just give in to what culture's telling us because that's what culture's telling us, or be true to caring for other people, putting others above ourselves. If, we have that conversation and someone's like, hey man, this is why that's, rough, for my kid, could you tell me next time if your daughter's going to wear a witch costume or whatever?
I'm going to warn you before I post a picture.
Have that kind of conversation, not on social media, not blasting you, but context and communication is one of those things that's huge as Christians to love one another.
And I think it's something that we do need to just be cautious of the way we engage with it, just because people know that a lot of times the church has a reputation for the things that it's against. And so like if we're out there just attacking other believers for the way they're engaging with this holiday, it just looks divisive. So I think if we can have just a supportive community around that, where if you see something you're like, well, I'm concerned about this, like reach out to that person in private, have that conversation, maybe even eye to eye if possible, because I think that's just more valuable than just kind of having these debates over something that, like we talked about in the beginning, a holiday that's very patchwork. We don't entirely know its full origins, and like let's just try to, like you said, redeem it.
Yeah, I think we got to ask the question of wisdom as well. So redemption is one big question. The other question is a question of how do we wisely interact with this, because there really are pitfalls, evils, dangers that could be out there if we're not wise about the way we go about doing things. Choosing costumes is one question that we should ask and say, how do we as followers of Jesus apply wisdom in that area? How do we interact with people? What do we celebrate? I think there's some things that obviously would be out of bounds that may be worth saying, like a lot of people participate in Ouija boards or in fortune telling or tarot cards or other things like that really have some dark spiritual origins to them. And the better part of wisdom says, hey, avoid those things as followers of Jesus. Don't even dip your toes into the water for the very first time on any of those kinds of ideas. Because there are dark forces out there that are looking for open doors. And if we unwisely approach this holiday in a way that opens up spiritual doors, what we're doing is we're inviting evil into our lives, and we don't want to be unwise about the way we approach those.
I would say one wise costume choice, if anyone is looking for one, is when I was in about the 3rd grade. My dad was pastoring a church in Wichita, Kansas, and we had a fall festival where you had to come dressed as your favorite Bible character.
Oh, man.
I came as Moses, which involved a sheet being tied around me, like almost toga style, and then my mom just put a bunch of baby powder in my hair to make it white. I
thought you were going to say you came as Adam.
No, that's an unwise.
That would be an unwise choice.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to cause anyone to stumble.
Pre-fall Adam.
Exactly.
Do never come as pre-fall Adam. You will end up in jail.
Post-fall Adam only.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, I think this has all been good conversation. I think it's healthy to discuss these things and give people that, a bit of discourse to kind of sort it out a little bit and know that it's okay to talk about, and that it's okay to kind of learn more and understand it. And that helps.
I think another question too, real quick, is can I glorify God through this?
Sure.
And so Scripture asks us in all things, glorify God. And so if it's not glorifying Him, I think that's one of those questions we have to ask. Not just Halloween, but it's pertinent to Halloween. Like, as I'm putting on a costume, there is like a tendency to maybe want to say, hey, this is my excuse to wear a lot less than I would normally wear, even though it's freezing cold out most of the time, because it's cute and that's what everyone else is doing. So I think there's one of those excuses. I think, like, for me, one of the things I used to kind of do, which was I thought was funny, it was like dress up as a girl and stuff like that. But now, like, with my own family story and like having a sibling that's transgender, I'm like, it would probably not be wise for me to ever dress my kid up as a girl, because that might be hurtful to people, especially as that's like a thing in society. And people might
way
feel
to
like,
start beef with Larry's parents.
People might feel like you're making fun of them as you show up to Sam's Club and as a woman with as Erica.
The year 2000 was very different.
So can I glorify God through this, through my costume, through the way that I'm hosting a party, all those kind of things? I think is always a wise question to ask. Halloween, but really we should ask it in almost anything we're doing in our lives.
Yep.
So
that's great. All right. Anybody else have anything to add before we consider this conversation?
I like what you said, Mark, about the people are out on Halloween, they're in the neighborhood. Like, I mean, we talk constantly about like reaching our neighbors and knocking on their door. I mean, this is an opportunity where they're coming to you, like what other time of year are streams of kids and families going to come knocking on your door, and you have the chance to meet them and engage them. I know that's what my mom really liked and still likes, is when the little kids from the neighborhood come up and she's like, oh, what's your name, and where do you live, and in a real brief moment getting to know the people in your neighborhood, and then that can just be a huge like stepping stone to build relationships with them, because you see them and you remember them from when they actually came to your house, So
I'll add in a couple of other practical things I've seen people do on Halloween that's great for neighborhood building. One is to sit out on your driveway, and sometimes I'll sit out on my neighbor's driveway with them. We'll kind of combine forces, and so instead of just coming to the door every time someone rings, I'm sitting with my neighbor outside for 2 hours while all the kids come by, and we have conversation in between. I've seen some other people say, hey, on Halloween, we're going to put out hot chocolate, which forces people to stop for 3 minutes, and you actually get to learn, hey, what's their name? What house do they live in? Those kinds of things. So they create some Halloween bonuses, or they'll sit out, they'll put a fire pit out. And then when the trick-or-treat time is done, they say, hey, let's sit around the fire pit, and they hang out outside with the fire pit. So there's some creative ways to say, how can I engage my neighbors even at a higher level? On a night that, like any other night of the year, you put out a fire pit, you don't have 20 people that you can invite to it who are coming to your house anyway. But on Halloween, you can do some of those things.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's great. And that's I think everyone could take a step, no matter how you engage in Halloween, of hospitality this year. In a couple of days, how do I go from, Larry's mom, which is great, handing out, how do I become more like that? I hand out candy and that's the end of it. That's, I know all kids want, but how do I engage the mom or dad? How do I ask the kid what their name is? It's like 3 more seconds to be, hey buddy, what's your name? Where do you live? What grade are you in? Or hi mom and dad, So just take another step, another layer to actually be more hospitable to your neighbors and get to know their stories, and don't throw shade at them if they're from another neighborhood and they're just coming for your candy. That's also okay too.
I know I'm going to Mark's neighborhood for trick or treating this
Bring
year.
it on, man. Actually, we have an amazing neighborhood for trick or treating. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome. All right, thanks everybody for listening, and thanks everybody for being here. Thanks Mark and Larry. That's awesome to have you guys here and have your insight on this. And Alex, thanks for being here. If anybody wants to reach out to us on social media, you can do that at CCC Omaha, or you can email us at podcast@cccomaha.org, and we'd be happy to hear your insight or answer any questions you might have. But until next time, we'll see you later.